All right, so get this. In 2020, wildfires in California burned an area, get this, bigger than the entire state of Connecticut.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And it's just one example. It feels like the U.S. is constantly getting hit with these natural disasters,
Yeah.
you know, wildfires, floods, earthquakes, hurricanes.
You're right to be worried. It's not just a feeling. The data shows a clear trend. Both the frequency and the intensity are increasing.
Yeah, it's definitely got people talking, wondering what's going on.
And what it means for the future, yeah.
Exactly. So today, we're going to take a deep dive into all of this. We've got all these articles, research, notes, the whole shebang about natural disasters in the U.S.
Okay.
And we're going to sort of pick out the most important pieces and try to, put the puzzle together.
Yeah, try to make sense of it all.
Yeah, exactly. Untangle everything going on from the geography of the U.S. to climate change, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And figure out what it means for everyone, really.
For all of us.
Yeah, for all of us. Okay, let's just jump right in. Let's start with the U.S. itself. Is there something, I don't know, unique about the land here that makes it so vulnerable to these disasters? Other countries have them too, right? It's not like it's just the U.S.
True, but the U.S. Is a special case in a way. It's just so geographically diverse with almost every type of climate and terrain you can think of.
Right.
Deserts, mountains, plains, coastlines.
The whole shebang.
Yeah, exactly. And all this variety, while it's beautiful and all,
Sure.
it also means that the country is just more open to a wider range of natural hazards than, well, a lot of other places.
So it's kind of like, I don't know, imagine a house with all these weak points.
Yeah.
And each one is susceptible to a different, kind of attack.
Perfect analogy. And it's not just the variety,
Right.
but the sheer scale of it all. I mean, think about the huge forests out west just ready to burn.
Yeah.
Or the massive Mississippi River basin, always at risk of flooding. These giant ecosystems, even small changes can have huge consequences.
So we've got this diverse landscape, a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got climate change.
Right.
It's a huge topic. But in a nutshell, how's it messing with all of this?
Well, climate change, it's basically a threat multiplier. The science is super clear on this. Global temperatures are rising, and that makes these natural disasters stronger, more frequent, and way harder to predict.
Right.
It's like turning up the volume on a speaker. The same song's playing, but it's louder, more chaotic.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
One of the articles you gave me mentioned the Saffir-Simpson scale.
Uh-huh.
Something about hurricanes.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Can you remind me how that works and how does climate change fit into all of this?
Sure. So the Saffir-Simpson scale, it basically categorizes hurricanes from 1 to 5 based on wind speed. 5 is the strongest.
Okay.
And what we're seeing now with climate change is, well, we might see a lot more Category 4 and 5 hurricanes in the future.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because warmer ocean water just fuels these storms.
Mhm.
Higher temps, more energy, faster winds, and, more destruction.
So it's almost like a double whammy.
Yeah.
The land's already vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and then climate change just pours gasoline on the fire.
Exactly. And a good example of this is Hurricane Harvey back in 2017. Remember that one? It just stalled over Houston,
Yeah.
dumped an insane amount of rain,
Yeah, tons of flooding.
catastrophic flooding. And studies showed that the crazy rainfall was directly linked to warmer than average water temperatures in the Gulf.
It's honestly kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
It feels like we're barely keeping up as it is, and now it's just getting worse, less predictable.
Right.
So where does that leave us, like, in terms of preparedness? Is the U.S., ready for this? Can we handle it?
That's a really good question and a tough one.
Okay.
I mean, on one hand, the U.S. has some of the most advanced disaster response systems in the world.
Thus.
But there's another side to this.
All right, before we go there,
Yep.
one of your notes mentioned something about mitigation when it comes to disaster response.
Oh, right.
Now, for, the average person,
Yeah.
what does that even mean?
Good point. So mitigation, it means we're trying to reduce the impact of disasters before they even happen.
Okay.
Think of things like building stronger levees, making buildings more earthquake resistant, managing forests to prevent wildfires.
Right.
It's all about being proactive,
So less about cleaning up the mess afterward.
Yeah, more about preventing a bigger mess in the first place.
Got it. So we have response on one side, mitigation on the other.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the whole picture? Or is there more to this preparedness paradox you mentioned?
There's definitely more, a lot more. And a big part of it has to do with, well, infrastructure. And we'll get into all of that in part 2.
All right, so infrastructure. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't exactly sound like the most exciting topic, but I have a feeling it's way more important than people realize.
Oh, it definitely is. Infrastructure, it's kind of like the unsung hero or sometimes the villain.
Oh, interesting.
When it comes to disaster preparedness, we're talking roads, bridges, power lines, dams, levees, even the buildings we live in.
Okay.
It all plays a huge part in how we handle, these events, literally and figuratively.
Got it. So what's the problem? Don't we have good infrastructure in the U.S.?
We do in some places, but a lot of it is getting old.
Right.
And it was built based on how things used to be, not on the supercharged disasters we're seeing now.
I see.
It's like, imagine you build a house 50 years ago and it can withstand 100-mile-per-hour winds.
Uh-huh.
But now hurricanes are hitting 150-mile-per-hour. You're in trouble.
Makes sense. So it's like having a top-notch fire department,
Yeah,
but all the fire hydrants are like rusted shut.
exactly. That's a great way to put it. We can have the best emergency services,
Right.
but if our infrastructure can't handle it, what's the point?
Right. You mentioned levees earlier,
Uh,
and one of my sources talked about the levee system in New Orleans.
oh, yeah.
Sounds like a lot of people are worried about those, even after all the work they did after Katrina.
Yeah. New Orleans is a really interesting case. I mean, the city's below sea level.
Wow.
It relies on this whole network of levees and pumps to stay dry.
Right.
After Katrina, they spent billions of dollars on upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still vulnerable, especially with sea levels rising.
So they're kind of fighting a losing battle.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
They make progress, but the problem keeps getting worse.
Makes you wonder, are we focusing enough on the long-term solutions, like tackling climate change? Or are we just putting out fires as they pop up?
That's a good question.
One of the articles actually had argued that focusing too much on climate change could actually distract from, getting prepared right now.
Interesting.
Like we need to do both.
Right.
Adapt to how things are right now while working towards those long-term goals.
I think that's a really important point. It's not one or the other.
Yeah.
We need to do it all, basically.
Okay, so we've talked infrastructure, climate change. What about the human factor? Are people in the U.S. doing enough to prepare themselves?
That's another complicated one.
Okay.
I mean, there's definitely more awareness now. People are taking steps to get ready, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Like what? What do you mean?
Well, get this. Less than half of Americans have a basic emergency preparedness kit.
Seriously?
Yeah, those kits, they're crucial, after a disaster. Water, food, first aid stuff, flashlight.
I'll be honest, I don't have one either.
Really?
I keep meaning to, but you know how it is.
I know.
So besides those kits, what else can people do?
Knowing your evacuation route is huge, especially if you live in a hurricane zone or a wildfire area.
Right.
Have a plan. Where would you go? How would you get there? And don't forget your pets.
Oh, that's a good point.
A lot of people forget about their pets in these situations.
So we've got personal preparedness, but what about on a community level? Can people, work together to make their neighborhoods more resilient?
Absolutely. Community preparedness can be super effective. Neighbors helping neighbors, that's often the first line of defense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Think about things like neighborhood watch programs, communication networks, even just knowing who might need extra help.
It's about like coming together,
Yeah.
realizing we're all in this together.
Exactly. We can't just rely on the government to save us every time.
So there's this kind of tension, right, between what the government needs to do and what communities need to do.
Right.
Sounds like we need both to make it through this.
You got it. It's not one or the other. It's both. Finding that balance. That's the key.
Wow, we've covered a ton in this deep dive.
Yeah.
From the land to the climate and, that preparedness gap. It's a lot.
It is.
And to be honest, kind of paints a scary picture.
Yeah.
So with everything we've talked about, what does the future look like for the U.S., when it comes to these natural disasters?
What's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I can't predict the future, obviously, but what we know now, the trends, the projections, it's not exactly comforting.
Right. So more heat waves, more droughts, more floods, hurricanes, everything just keeps getting worse.
Basically, yeah. Based on what we know, that's where we're headed. Climate change, it's going to keep fueling more extreme weather. And the U.S., with all its different landscapes and, older infrastructure, well, it's going to be hit hard.
So it sounds kind of bleak. But is there anything we can actually do? Or are we just, stuck watching things fall apart?
No, it's not hopeless. I think the key is to be proactive.
Okay.
Instead of just reacting to disasters, We got to focus on preventing them, mitigating the impact, being resilient in the long run.
So less about crisis management, more about risk management.
Exactly. So on a global level, we got to tackle climate change, right?
Right.
Reduce greenhouse gas emissions big time,
Yeah.
switch to cleaner energy, be more efficient, change how we live.
Those are big changes.
Right.
What about locally, like in communities across the U.S.? What can people do on the ground to protect themselves?
Oh, there's tons we can do. Cities can invest in green infrastructure, things like parks, wetlands. They act like natural sponges, soak up floodwater. Coastal communities can build seawalls, reinforce natural barriers like dunes to protect against those storm surges.
That makes sense.
And in areas prone to wildfires, stricter building codes, defensible space around homes.
Right, to try and stop the spread.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
all about adapting, making our communities more resilient.
And that also means changing how we think about nature, right?
Totally. We're part of this ecosystem, not separate from it. Protecting forests, wetlands. It's not just about saving pretty plants and animals.
Yeah.
It's about lessening the impact of disasters. Those natural systems, they act like shock absorbers, regulate water flow, prevent erosion.
It sounds like there's a lot of work to do, but also a lot we can achieve.
Definitely. It's a challenge, no doubt, but we can do it. Humans are adaptable, we're creative, we've proven that throughout history.
Right.
Governments, communities, individuals, if we work together, we can build a safer, more sustainable future.
You mentioned managed retreat in your notes,
Oh, yeah.
especially for coastal communities.
Right.
Sounds kind of radical. What is that exactly?
Well, yeah. It's a bit controversial, but it's becoming more and more relevant.
I see.
It basically means moving people and infrastructure away from high-risk areas, like coastlines that are eroding because of rising sea levels.
That's a tough decision.
It is. It's about admitting that engineering solutions have their limits.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's better to move than to try and hold on to land that might become uninhabitable.
It's a hard conversation to have, but it's one we can't ignore anymore.
Right. It all comes down to honest conversations, about risk, costs, benefits, and tough choices.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's complicated, no easy answers, but it's clear that we got to do something.
Yeah, we do.
So what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I want them to know that natural disasters are a threat, a growing one, but we're not powerless.
Right.
We got to understand the risks, be proactive, and work together.
I like that.
That's how we build a resilient future for us and for everyone who comes after us.
That's a great message. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive exploring natural disasters in the U.S.
It was my pleasure.
We hope you learned something, and we hope you feel empowered to do something. Remember, we have the power to shape the future. Stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay safe.